We are live.
Good evening and welcome to the December 2nd Planning Commission meeting. If we can have a roll call, please.
Chair Gutierrez, hello?
I'm here. Go ahead.
Chair
Here.
Gutierrez?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Hogan?
Present.
Secretary Kyle is excused. Commissioner Faulkner? Thank you. Thank you,
Here.
Commissioner Faulkner. Thank you, Commissioner Lawrence.
Here.
Commissioner Pava. Commissioner Pava.
Here.
Thank you. And Commissioner Satania.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, there is a quorum present.
Thank you. If we can have a roll call, I'm sorry, not roll call, Pledge of Allegiance, Commissioner Lawrence, if you would lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes, November 4th and November 21st. Any changes from staff on the November 4th minutes?
There are no changes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any changes from the commission?
Motion to approve, Commissioner Faulkner.
Second, Commissioner Lawrence.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. If we can have a roll call, please.
Commissioner, Vice Chair Hogan.
Yes.
Melissa, we're having some trouble with your
Commissioner
audio.
Lawrence? I'm not sure what's going on. Maybe I can do this roll call and then I'll sign off and sign on after when you guys start the case.
Okay.
Hello? Okay. Commissioner Pava,
Yes.
thank you. Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Satania,
Yes.
and I'm not sure if I called on Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, the motion has been approved.
Thank you.
And
Moving
also,
on.
Mr. Chair, I don't think you called for the approval of the agenda.
Right, I was about to say that.
Oh, yes, you're right. I'm sorry. Let's go back to that. Approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We're gonna recommend postponement of the second item. Case number 2021-4379 and 2021-4380. Let's make sure that's the right, no, I'm sorry. It's the Caja del Rio subdivision general plan amendment, subdivision rezoning and preliminary development plan and preliminary subdivision plat in order to address some notice issues. We're postponing it to the January 6, 2022 Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Escobar. Any changes from the commission?
Motion to approve, Commissioner Faulkner.
Second, Commissioner Lawrence.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve as amended and a second by Commissioner Lawrence. If we can have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Pava,
Yes.
and Commissioner Satania.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Okay, now going back to the minutes. Give me 1 second. We're going to be working on the November 18th, 2021 minutes. Any changes from staff?
I thought I just rewrote that for the postponement.
No, we're on the minutes.
Oh, I'm
Dan.
sorry. No, there's no changes to the minutes.
No changes to the minutes. Thank you. Any changes from the commission?
Commissioner Faulkner to approve.
Commissioner Lawrence, second.
Thank you. If we could have a roll call, please.
Vice Chair Hogan, Vice Chair Hogan,
Yes.
you're muted.
Sorry about that.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Pava,
Yes.
and Commissioner Satania.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion has been approved.
Okay, thank you. There is no findings, no old business. So moving on to new business, the first is case number 2021-4375, 2868 Rafina Street General Plan Amendment. Also case 2021-4376, 2868 Rafina Street rezoning.
Good evening,
So-
Chair and Commissioners. That's my case. So, I have a presentation here and hey, Dan, can you, I'm sorry to ask you this, but my presentation is still kind of not quite right, slipping down the screen. Is there a possibility you could?
Sure.
Sorry about this. We'll get it up here. It's a quick presentation.
That's fine. While you're working on that, Mrs. Byers, are you gonna try and sign out and come back on? Is it okay if we continue and you can get it later? Or do you want us to wait for you?
No, go ahead. I'm going to try and, I'm going to continue. I'm still recording it.
Okay, so we can go ahead and continue. Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. It will be a little while before we get to public comments, so we should be okay. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Wyden, go ahead.
Okay, alrighty, let's see. Let's see. I have that on my screen, so let's see. Okay. This first case is 2021-4375, 2868 Rafina Street General Plan Amendment. That is on your screen, right? Okay.
Yes.
Jennifer Jenkins of Jenkins Gavin Inc. is the agent for HomeWise Inc. applicant. I request approval of a general plan future land use map amendment to change the future land use classification from industrial to community commercial. The property is approximately 2.39 acres of land and is located at 2868 Rafina Street. The second case, 2021-4376, the applicant is requesting approval of a rezoning from I1, which is light industrial, to the C2 commercial for future development of a mixed use site development, including 12,237 square feet of commercial space and 68 dwelling units. The commission, we're recommending that the commission recommend approval of the general plan amendment request, which is case 2021-4375, and the rezoning request, case number 2021-4376, with the conditions of approval and technical corrections listed in this report. There are 4 motions will be required in this case. The first, to recommend approval or denial of the general plan amendment request for case number 2021-4375. Secondly, recommend approval or denial of the rezoning request for case number 2021-4376. The third is approve or deny the findings of fact and conclusions of law for case number 2021-4375 as proposed in Exhibit A, and approve or deny the findings of fact and conclusions of law for case number 2021-4376 as proposed in Exhibit A. Conditions of approval are not to be focused on these two cases this evening because general plan amendment and rezoning don't get conditioned with conditions of approval. So those are there for you. We did get some lots of responses from the DRT development review team. But again, those are not to be used in the conditioning of approval on these two cases. In review of this case for the general plan amendment, according to subsection 14-3.2E, we found in reviewing the case that the applicant did meet these criteria, and also in reviewing the rezoning case, we found that they did meet the approval criteria per subsection 14-3.5C. Early neighbor notification meeting was held September 28th, and no members of the public were in attendance at that meeting. I just want to point the expiration of this type of development. General plan and rezoning do not expire. However, if the applicant's request is approved by the governing body, the applicant will then return to the Planning Commission for development plan approval. With that, that concludes my presentation, and I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wynett. Is the applicant here, and do they have a presentation for us?
Good evening, Chairman. I'm here and I'm ready to be sworn in.
Good evening. Ms. Byers, are you with us?
There she is.
Mr. Chair, she may not have heard you.
Oh, let me, I was looking for her, but Ms. Byers, are you with us?
Hello.
We're ready to swear in the applicant if you're ready.
Okay.
Could just swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, if that's helpful. So I don't know if that counts or not, but
Tricia, can we have someone else swear her in besides Ms. Byers?
No, well,
We need the notary.
Patricia.
Could our attorney do it?
I am not a notary in this state yet.
I'm a notary. I don't know if that counts.
So is there somebody else on staff that can do it that needs to be a notary, Patricia?
Yes, and if anyone was a notary, I don't think.
Yeah,
anyone.
I'm not a notary. I let mine expire.
Mr. Kluk, you a notary?
No, sir. I'm trying to get a hold of Melissa, though.
I don't see her connecting yet, so.
Yeah, she came in and.
No, it looks like she's.
Like she's trying again.
Let's give her a minute.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Do I think to swear in Ms. Jenkins now?
Yes, please.
Are you
please
ready
swear
for
her.
me or did she already?
She's ready.
Go
Go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you. I apologize. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer Jenkins with Jenkins Gavin, 130 Grant Avenue, Suite 101, Santa Fe. Thank you, Melissa. Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. I am happy to be here this evening on behalf of HomeWise in request for a general plan amendment and rezone for the property at 2868 Rafina Street. I do have a brief presentation, so I'm going to go ahead, if it's okay, and share my screen. So as I mentioned here this evening on behalf of HomeWise, Mike Lofton, the executive director, and we are joined here this evening by Daniel Slavin, the director of real estate development, and Jamie Hadamio, the planning manager. Obviously, Jenkins Gavin providing land planning services, and the rest of our team includes Santa Fe Engineering for traffic engineering. Bohannon Houston conducted the parking study, and of course, Donna is our case manager. So the 2.3 acre property is a vacant parcel located at the southwest corner of Rafina and Clark Road. This is, so we're just, basically one parcel east of Siler. So here we have the intersection of Siler and Cerrillos. I think everybody's probably pretty familiar with this area that we're in. Right up here is the new Siler Studios project that is just completing, and we actually had a meeting with Daniel Warwath today and learned that it looks like his first move-ins might happen on Monday, so that's very exciting. And actually this is the location of the headquarters for HomeWise here in Santa Fe, which is right here. And so the property is right next door to that Siler Studios office complex, right on Siler Road. So the subject property is currently zoned I-1 industrial. And you can see that in this area here, it's fairly diverse. This neighborhood has been in transition and really has evolved. I think the presence of Meow Wolf in the area has really spurred a lot of new development activity, new business activity. Obviously, we have Siler Studios here in the red zoned C2. And the city of Santa Fe obviously has office presence on Siler Road as well. We have, this is actually, we are looking at the future land use map, not the zoning map, but you can see here in this area, kind of just to the north and to the east of the site, this actually has a general plan designation of business park. So the city is really obviously looking for redevelopment opportunities for some of these industrial properties into more of a business park scenario. And then there's obviously some residential zoning nearby. And then of course the commercial corridor along Cerrillos Road. And then we get into the actual zoning. So the area in the gray is I-2, and then the light purple is I-1. And then of course the commercial corridor, and then there are some bits and pieces of residential zoning in the area as well. So the intent of the application before you to rezone the property from I-1 to C2 is to permit the construction of a mixed use project on the property. And so this is our conceptual site plan. And that we developed just to understand, how the access would work and what the property could really support. And so we're just going to walk through this a little bit, showing just really what the development intent is. And of course, our next step after we move through the rezone process is to work on a development plan submittal for the city. So again, we rotated the image on the page. So we have Clark Road here at the bottom of the page. So Cerrillos is kind of off the page a little bit here to the left. And then we have Rafina here on the right side. And then just off the page, off the top of the page here would be Siler Road. And these are the HomeWise offices that I pointed out here momentarily ago. So we are proposing 2 access points into the project, one on Rafina and one on Clark, that creates a nice continuous kind of loop through the project. We're proposing 3 buildings. The first building on the corner is our mixed use building. So on the ground floor of building 1 would be commercial space, looking at potentially a combination of, office, studio, maybe some retail. This doesn't feel like a real retail heavy environment here. So looking more at office and studio spaces. And then building number 2 and number 3 are both residential buildings. And so we're looking at for sale condominium product here. So obviously HomeWise is in the business of home ownership. And so looking to introduce home ownership opportunities in this neighborhood that has great proximity to services, great proximity to employment. There is tons of employment in this area that is within an easy walk or bicycle distance. And so HomeWise has really been focusing on in recent years about really incorporating more mixed use activity into their projects. The El Camino Crossing project, which is not far from here, just down Harrison Road on Agua Fria, is a mixed use project that is doing really, really well and really dynamic. And so that has become kind of a more recent focus of HomeWise, is how do we create these kind of dynamic mixed use communities, whether they're small like this or a little bit larger and more, more significant. So we are showing parking in a couple of different areas. We are looking on the ground floor of buildings 2 and 3 to provide some kind of tuck under parking. And then the balance of the parking is surface parked. So we have parking along the driveway here. We have a central parking area here. And then we are creating an outdoor courtyard area that can be accessed by the residents as well as by the commercial businesses or for events. And we will be making sidewalk improvements and street tree improvements along our Clark Road frontage as well as along Rafina Street as part of the project. And we are also proposing to incorporate 12 on-street public parking places along Clark Road. So those spaces don't technically count towards our parking count, but we think that, with direct access into these commercial businesses along Clark Road, that having this on-street parking here would be really fantastic. Somebody to, pull in, go in, grab a cup of coffee, and head on their way. And so, and this is really creating an opportunity, because right now Clark Road is a little, I would say, mildly substandard in its construction at the moment. And on the other side of Rafina Street, the intersection doesn't quite align. So we are going to actually be able to repair that situation by widening Clark Road in order to accommodate the sidewalk improvements and the parking spaces, which is really going to kind of correct this offset intersection that we have here at Rafina. So just overall looking at the proposed program, again, we just under 2.4 acres. The property is currently zoned I1 and we're requesting a down zone to C2. The land use designation in the general plan is industrial and we're asking to modify that to community commercial. As I mentioned, we have a mixed use building and then we have 2 residential buildings and a total of about 12,000 square feet of commercial and 70 dwelling units. And as we refine the program, as we pivot into the development plan in terms of unit size and unit mix and all of that, obviously some of these, these figures are going to evolve as we move forward. So what's really exciting about this project is that we are right in what has come to be called the Seiler-Rufina Nexus. So we are in a federally designated opportunity zone. The federal government identified a few years ago opportunity zones, which are very certain census tracts that were identified as really in need of investment. And so there are tax benefits for developing certain types of projects and opportunity zones. And so the City of Santa Fe Economic Development Department sort of saw this as an opportunity to kind of brand the area in order to attract investment and really studied it. So what does this area really need and what makes the most sense? And so they created this Seiler-Rafina nexus. And really identifying this, not only is it a federally designated opportunity zone, but the city's economic development department really sees this as a priority redevelopment area. So our project really addresses the needs and the opportunities that the city identified, meaning addressing mixed use development, other types of related commercial around potentially dining, coffee opportunities, green space, as well as affordable and middle market housing. With respect to the affordable housing program, obviously we'll be meeting the minimum 20% requirement of the Santa Fe Homes program. But obviously this is HomeWise, and so they are in the business of affordable housing. And typically with their projects, they typically achieve a 40 to 50% affordability rate. So that is really exciting and a fantastic opportunity. And in this location, again, with great proximity to services, public transportation, as well as employment in the area. And so the city identified, the ideal zoning categories to achieve these objectives with either C2, C1, or mixed use zoning would be most advantageous. So this is a map of the Census Tract Opportunity Zone, and you can see the subject property right here. And also, in addition to the nexus, it was recently selected by the New Mexico Main Street program for promotional assistance in really kind of creating an identifiable neighborhood commercial corridor in this area. And this is something that can really be beneficial for the area businesses and also attracting investment in the area. So this has been recognized not only by the city, but also recognized by the state as a really key opportunity for redevelopment. So what's the vision for the project? So the vision is really an urban mix of for sale housing with, outdoor courtyard space and adjacent commercial space, a healthy mix of market rate and affordable homes, and really attracting businesses that really respond to what is needed in this community and really complements what's already in the neighborhood. And then again, outdoor space, as we mentioned, which is not only opportunities just for open space, but outdoor gatherings and events, and something that can also support the commercial businesses as well. And really being responsive to the momentum that is really being created in this area with, what's going on with Meow Wolf and Seiler Studios and some of the other redevelopment in the area. This is kind of, this is our maker place in this part of town. And it's really dynamic and exciting. And so we're really excited about the opportunity to provide some commercial and housing options that don't currently exist. So that concludes the presentation. I did want to touch on one more. Element. We prepared which you probably saw in your packet. We did prepare a parking demand analysis. The city code, per a couple of different code sections that are cited here below, state that parking requirements in 14-8.6 B4A must equal the total for each of the separate uses unless a shared parking plan is approved. Furthermore, the code goes on to state that cumulative parking space requirements for mixed use occupancies may be reduced if the applicant demonstrates that the peak requirements of the occupancies occur at different times, such as midday for office uses and evening for residential uses. So we engaged Bohannon Houston, a local engineering firm, to prepare a parking demand study to really assess what is the actual parking demand for this type of project in this actual location, because we really wanted to understand it. And so on the basis of that parking demand study, we are proposing a shared parking program as part of our application. And as we, of course, come forward with our development plan, some of these figures are going to change. Our total, parking count as the program refines is going to morph a little bit. I don't think it'll change dramatically, but it'll change some. So what we're showing now is conceptually what we're envisioning as far as the parking demand and the parking supply. And so the principal findings of the study, if you didn't have an opportunity to read it, is that the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which is called the ITE, that is the national organization that establishes standards for preparing traffic studies. So that's the organization that establishes the trip generation, right? So it says, what kind of a use do you have and how much traffic does that generate? That's statistically established by the ITE and is the basis for every traffic study that gets generated. In addition, the ITE also has statistical information regarding parking generation data, and that demonstrates actual parking demand for the project is actually 85 spaces, which is 25% lower than what the code is currently requiring. And so the actual parking demand as established by the ITE would be more than satisfied by the 104 parking spaces that we are proposing. And then of course the 12 spaces in the public realm that we are looking to create at our expense. And as I mentioned, we are within a short walking distance of public transportation, employment, services, amenities. And so the need for private vehicles is significantly reduced. And then one thing is interesting when you compare Santa Fe to other communities, similar communities of similar sizes, our parking rates are much, much higher. And so we really are trying to balance the need for infill, the need for redevelopment in this identified priority area, and the need for affordable housing, and weighing that against excessive parking. And so with respect to the feasibility of the shared parking, the analysis shows that the peak parking demand for the project occurs at different times of the day, and that the shared parking strategies are suggested to maximize the use of the parking supply. So, so with that, we would ask for acknowledgement this evening that there is support for the shared parking approach based upon the parking demand study that we submitted, with the understanding that that needs to be incorporated as well into the development plan submittal. But we do need to know what our design parameters are before HomeWise invests significantly in a full development plan submittal, incorporating architectural, civil engineering, all those elements. And so we would ask for the commission's kind of concurrence tonight that we are, that the parking demand study and that methodology and those findings do support a shared parking approach for this particular project. And then we'll be able to present the details of that with the final program when we're back in front of the commission for development plan approval. So with that, that completes my presentation. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Before we get to public comment, Mr. Escobar, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I would add that the captions and what was advertised were only for a general plan and rezoning amendment. That is, so the criteria that you must weigh these applications are listed on Donna's reports, pages 7 to 13. The applicant will need to submit the traffic analysis or the traffic study with the development plan when that application is being presented to the Planning Commission for a full analysis. So all you can do, you can acknowledge it, take a look at it for information only as it was presented in the memo as information only. But tonight's meeting is specifically for the general plan amendment and the rezoning.
Okay, and just to be perfectly clear, traffic and parking are things that in the conceptual site plan that we need to stay away from, correct?
You can consider them in all of your deliberation, but ultimately you're going to be weighing the facts of this case pertinent to the criteria for a rezoning application and a general plan application, general plan first and then rezoning. That is what you will weigh and measure your deliberation against. We do not place conditions of approval on ordinances. We typically shy away from that. Our legal department has identified that everybody has the rights for the type of zoning that they get across the board, and that the development plan or planned unit development plans, those are where those conditions of approval are typically addressed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Escobar. Assistant Attorney Patricia, anything you want to add, or?
No, I think Dan actually summarized it quite well.
Okay, if we get into a sticky situation, don't be afraid to raise your hand and let us know. Thank you so much. This is a public hearing. If there's anybody from the public that would like to speak on this case, please raise your hand.
I do not see any hands being raised, Mr. Chair, at this point.
Nor do I. Once again, anybody from the public that would like to testify on this case, please raise your hand. And anybody in the public, the next case has been postponed. So if you're waiting on that and joined us late, we will not be hearing that this evening. It's only this case. Going once. Going twice. I'm going to close the public hearing and turn it over to the commission. Commissioners. Okay, had to change my view. I'm not sure how hands came up, but I have Vice Chair Hogan first, followed by Commissioner Lawrence, Commissioner Pava, and Satenya. And I hope I'm not upsetting anybody, but that's how I see the hands up. So, Vice Chair Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a couple of questions on, the presentation where you were sort of talking about the excitement of the area and the nexus, and wanting to just understand a little bit more on how you see that applying to this project. There's two streetscapes that have benefit to, or the possibility of benefiting from the project, but we haven't really heard much about what you were thinking about. Can you expand a little bit?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman, Commissioner Hogan, and commissioners. So the primary crux of this relative to the way the city has envisioned the nexus is the introduction of housing opportunities and a mixed use environment. And that's really key. And, the industrial zoning was modified in, probably within the last 7 or 8 years to allow you to have food service in industrial zones, because Java Joe's is like the great addition to that neighborhood, right? It used to be prohibited. You couldn't even have a coffee shop in the midst of all that employment, right? Where people could go grab a sandwich for lunch and walk and do that. So I think that back then the city kind of started recognizing that these areas needed an opportunity for a more diverse use mix. And in attracting investment. And, the general plan is really, really clear on this, that a mix of uses should be occurring in all of our neighborhoods in the city, not just some of them, but all of them. And so when we look at these types of areas that are, this is really an area in transition, and we really see this as an opportunity to reflect that. And again, provide affordable housing opportunities in the midst of great access to employment, transit, and services. And while also providing some really cool dynamic commercial space to support our local small businesses.
Okay. And relative to the Main Street program, what does that bring to the table?
So the Main Street program is a state initiative through the State Economic Development Department, where they provide support on allowing these kind of older Main Street areas. And it started out, as a revitalization effort for existing kind of neglected Main Street areas. And how do you, again, brand those areas, attract investment? And the Main Street program has since evolved to capture, redevelopment areas generally that wouldn't necessarily fit that sort of mainstream definition. Main Street definition. And so there has been collaboration among some of the stakeholders in the area, including HomeWise, with the city about some, branding opportunities and PR opportunities for really attracting attention and really having people, rethink how they envision this area and what's possible there.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, if I could go on just with one more.
Yes, please do.
Is there a Rafina Street plan or something that's sort of, a Main Street project kind of integrates and, blocks together, looks out for ways to improve circulation, all kinds of things, traffic flow. And that has a lot to do with how the streetscape evolves. And I'm just wondering what you guys are following in terms of guidance for Rafina.
Was that question to me, Commissioner?
Ideally.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. So I'm not aware of any sort of plan around Rafina or Siler in terms of, thinking about as a comparison, like the link or something like that, in terms of what the vision is for how those streetscapes themselves evolve. I'm not aware that the city has engaged in a planning effort in that regard. I can tell you that as redevelopment happens, especially I think the impact of the Siler Studios, of the Siler Yard, that inevitably we're going to see, a lot more pedestrian activity and all of that. And so hopefully, as a result of this, there can be investment in some of those, streetscape improvements. But I'm not aware of anything at the moment beyond, the initiatives that I discussed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hogan. Commissioner Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Jenkins, I wanted to ask for a little bit more information about the conversations and the thoughts so far about the improvements on Clark. I am on it relatively regularly, and it always strikes me as pretty narrow, pretty overgrown. This change, it would see increased traffic. You mentioned the idea of, I don't know if you said widening, but you said parking, which to me implies necessary widening. I'm wondering if you could give a little more information about what conversations there are and what sort of the vision is for changes to that as part of this effort.
Great, thank you, Chairman, Commissioner Lawrence, and Commissioners. So yeah, Clark is, it's a 50-foot right-of-way, so it's actually quite generous in terms of the public right-of-way that's available there. So we're not proposing any changes to the right-of-way itself. And then it has like a the asphalt paving there. There's really no curb and gutter. It's sort of occasionally there's a piece of curb and gutter, maybe at a driveway going into something, but it's as you know, it's developed at a pretty low standard right now. So on our side of the road, on the west side of Clark, we are going to be adding a 5-foot sidewalk, a 5-foot planting strip with street trees, curb and gutter, a row of on-street parking. Right now it looks like we can accommodate 12 spaces, which is great. And then so that's going to kind of force the drive lanes over a little bit to the east, right? And which will allow us to align the intersection. And I actually have an image, I think, that shows this a little better than what was available in my presentation. So if I may, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen one more time, and we can talk about that. So this is, let me just back up one notch here. So here's Clark, and then you cross Rafina, and Clark continues on the other side, and you can see that these are the drive lanes for Clark here, and then it's kind of offset. So if you're crossing the street, you sort of are going at an angle here. And so as we kind of push the drive lanes to the east with the improvements we're doing along our frontage, that is going to serve to align the drive lanes with the balance of Clark on the other side of Rafina.
Great, and that doesn't eat into your neighbor across the street. That's all within the existing right-of-way.
Correct. Yeah, it has no impact on the property across the street.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Mr. Chair, I don't have any other questions.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Pava.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question would be, when I read the findings of fact or the zone change that's proposed, finding 18 is very, very specific about 68 units and 12,127 square feet. Exactly. Is this typical to describe it with this much detail? Is there any concern that maybe a little bit more leeway in the description is necessary, or is this just the way this is done?
I think I will defer to staff, but I may just add really quickly, Commissioner Pava and commissioners, that, you know, we are presenting a conceptual site plan. This is, so there is no, you know, our limitation is the zoning and the constraints of the site, right? And so when our next step is to come back with a development plan that'll be specific. So we are by no means stating that 68 is the maximum number of units or 12,000 square feet is the maximum number. That is just what was conceptually presented. So it's my understanding that the findings are just memorializing what was presented, but it is not intended to be any sort of limitation on development. But I would again defer to staff to clarify that.
I would as well.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, typically those criteria are set in chapter 14 specific to how a rezoning is going to meet the general plan criteria. So each finding is specific to categories within the general plan that allow us to rezone, along with specific criteria within the zoning change, allowing us to make that change to the map. So I guess I would agree that is a little bit more specific than we generally put in place. However, it was used in a way that Donna was able to explain how she felt during her review that the criteria was being addressed by the applicant that she was in agreement with. It might behoove the applicant to go over her presentation on the findings for a general plan and the findings for rezoning to further hone down the commission's idea of whether you believe or don't believe she is meeting that criteria for a general plan amendment and for a rezoning. She did go over a future development plan, but the issues relevant to the criteria were somewhat glossed over, and she may want to go over those a little bit more in detail to help the commission with meeting the criteria. But staff is in agreement that she has addressed those concerns, and we believe that they could move forward to the governing body with a positive recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Escobar. Mr. Chair, I have one other follow-up question, sort of related. This has to do when you look at the zoning map that would be proposed, you end up with an island of C2. It's almost a peninsula, it's almost an isthmus, but it is an island. And back in the day, we used to call this sometimes spot zoning. I don't think this actually is a case of spot zoning. However, there's nothing in the findings that directly addresses why this isn't. When I look at findings 20 and 21 and 22, it kind of justifies why it's not, but we never hit the nail on the head. I don't know if it's necessary in this case. I yield to staff's discretion, but I just raised the issue prior to us considering motions. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission. The property in question does meet the general requirements for a rezoning because it exceeds the 2-acre minimum that requires. So it has the eligibility to rezone itself under those conditions without being categorized as a spot zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Escobar. Mr. Pava, you good? Commissioner Satenia.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Ms. Jenkins. Ms. Jenkins, if you can pull up the original site plan, I just had a couple questions about connectivity and again, parking. I know that's not necessarily required for the approval of the rezoning or the changes to the general amendment, but it sounds like that's the direction that you're heading that you'll be proposing to us in the future. So I just wanted to get a couple comments and questions in.
Okay.
Sure. My first question is just regarding connectivity. It just seems, has there been any discussions about actually connecting the property to the adjacent property that might make more parking available? I mean, we're talking about shared parking and there's limited spaces for residential areas. So what has that been considered at all?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I could have potentially, not focused on that detail in my presentation, so apologies. So yes, Commissioner Satenia and commissioners, as you can see right here, we are proposing a pedestrian connection to the office complex directly next door. And we also have an agreement to lease 13 parking spaces from the property next door. And so that is going to be great, additional overflow parking, and we're looking at leasing spaces kind of right here, just adjacent to HomeWise in this area. So it's going to be very proximate and creating that pedestrian connection there.
Sure. And I see that the dumpsters are there, but in terms of, and I appreciate the pedestrian connectivity, but has there been any consideration to actually connect the roadway across the property lines, especially if you're going to be having shared parking potentially on the other side, that you can actually drive to that other property?
We did actually look at that, and it honestly, it didn't really work very well in terms of potentially, doing a shared access situation here. It just, we did play with that, and it honestly, it just didn't work. And it didn't really gain us much of anything in terms of parking or additional space. And we ended up, we had to have kind of to get over here and get into our circulation anyway. So we did explore that, but it didn't really seem that it made a whole lot of sense. We did submit a traffic study with our application, and there aren't really any, this is a very slow speed roadway, and we are not generating a lot of traffic here. So there really, there were not any issues that arose out of, any proximity issues with the adjacent driveway. But we did explore that, but it didn't really make sense for us.
Okay. Can you just confirm how many residences, total residences that you're proposing again?
Actually, there was a typo in the presentation. This plan proposes around 68 residences.
And how many parking spaces currently are we looking at in addition to the off-street or the on-street parking on Clark Road?
So with the on-street parking on Clark Road, we have 116 spaces.
Got it. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Satenia. Commissioner Faulkner.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Well, just one really. Do you have another example of how this shared parking, like, is there an example you can point to in Santa Fe where it's been effective?
I don't know, because honestly, there are not a lot of mixed use projects historically in Santa Fe where you have residential and commercial activities happening on the same parcel or within the same project. It is something that the city encourages, the general plan encourages it. We have a lot of zoning that permits it and encourages it, but we haven't seen a lot of it built.
Okay, and then the other question I have is, you're kind of innovating in the sense that you're moving into a category that there isn't a lot of development in the city right now. What challenges do you expect you're going to face between this presentation and the development plan? Like, what things do you think are going to change along the timeline of the project?
Thank you, Commissioner Faulkner and commissioners. Actually, we spent a lot of time developing this site plan. Like I said, we're still at a schematic level, but we put a lot of effort into it to really understand what makes sense and how the property could reasonably be developed. And so I'm really not expecting dramatic changes in terms of like where the access is or where the parking is or where the buildings are, right? I think that, once we get in, the site is relatively flat, so we're not expecting really any terrain issues. All the utilities are quite available. And so, the devil's in the details in terms of, because, these buildings themselves have not yet been designed. We're just looking at this from kind of a yield analysis of how many units could potentially be accommodated here. But yet the program is like, are we doing mainly 1 and 2 bedrooms? Are we going to throw in some studios? Like what's the demand? And HomeWise is really dedicated. They do a ton of research and they talk to people and they really want to learn what people really want. And, we did some really adorable 1-bedroom kind of 750 square foot condos at El Camino Crossing. Those things were so popular. People loved them. And so that's really good information, right? And that's in a very similar area. So we're like, well, maybe we'll weigh a little heavier on the 1-bedrooms. And so it's really those types of details. But as far as the site itself, I think it's going to be pretty consistent to what you see today.
Right. And so like one of the things that I get concerned with is we see these in this kind of presentation. And then by the time the project's finalized, we see a lot of changes that either rule out amenities or it rules out affordable housing. And so do you foresee anything that could shift the formula for affordable housing? You mentioned that there's a lot of jobs in the area and everything's walkable. I don't see any jobs in the area that could afford anything other than low income housing. It's mostly retail jobs and restaurant jobs. And those do not afford you to live in a 1,200 square foot condo for $400,000. And so I like the idea that it's walkable, but we have to keep in mind that the jobs that are in the area that are walkable jobs are not indicative of market value housing.
No,
absolutely. They're more indicative of affordable housing.
And the employment that we speak of is not just the Cerrillos corridor that might be more service industry focused, right? We're really looking at that whole area in the Siler area, in this industrial area in Meow Wolf, and there's a lot of people who are manufacturing and they've got going concerns and business owners in the area. And so it's pretty diverse in terms of what those employment opportunities are. And if we look at the whole area, that does include, the Cerrillos corridor, but I'm going to actually have Jamie Jaramillo. She's the planning manager for HomeWise. She's been, working on this really closely in terms of the vision for this project. So I'd invite her to chime in on your question as well.
Do I need to be sworn in?
Yes, yes. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Jamie Jaramillo with HomeWise, 1301 Siler Road, Building D, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87507.
Thank you.
So Commissioner Faulkner, I wanted to address your question because one of the biggest topics that we've been discussing as it relates to the site plan and how things move and might change is the parking, obviously. So the number of dwelling units we think are supported by the proposed site plan and the current number of parking spaces, in addition to the shared parking that we've proposed with the HomeWise office. So the one thing that I would say would be that I would urge the commission's support. I would urge your support on that shared parking plan and really just the acknowledgement that you think that we are being appropriate with the way that we have assigned parking to the number of units, because that would definitely change our development program moving forward if we were required to have the full number of parking spaces per Chapter 14.
So, Mr. Chair, can I follow up?
Yes, please.
From what I understand, we can't contemplate or approve or disapprove of the parking or traffic plan tonight because this isn't the appropriate phase for that. And what my concern is that your shared parking only works if the jobs in the area are walkable to kind of offset the need for parking. And what I know of the area is there may be manufacturers, there may be a litany of different job opportunities out there, but they're all going to be in the same pay range. You're not going to have someone who can get a home, who can get an apartment or a home or condo or whatever in this development and be making over $150,000, right? So then the question becomes, do the jobs that you're anchoring your parking concept on, do they match the cost of the units that you're selling?
If I may.
Let me hold on real quick before anybody goes. Assistant Attorney Patricia, are we crossing the line? Is there something?
Thank you, Chair, Commissioner Faulkner. This hearing is for the general plan amendment, and the rezoning is not for future development plan or future parking plan. Like Commissioner Faulkner said, there are things that you can consider, but this is just about rezoning and the general plan amendment. Those issues will come up whenever there is a development plan, but this is not that time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Faulkner, is it fair to just throw those out as ideas for them to contemplate coming forward?
Yes, Mr. Chair, because it seems like a heavy-weighted concept to put in a conversation that we can't make a decision on tonight. Like, we can't approve the traffic plan or not approve of it. We can't, or the parking. And so I'm curious as to why it's brought up at this point in the decision-making, other than just to kind of throw a net out there and see what fish you get back. If we can't really make a decision, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this question, but just for the developers' information, you look at that area and it doesn't seem like there's as many walkable, jobs that are above minimum wage. And so then the concern becomes, are the units that you're going to have that are affordable, do they match the economy of the area? And then that leads into the parking plan. And so that's just my concern, is it seems like there's kind of like a pie in the sky understanding of what jobs are available there. And it's not realistic for the area unless there is 50% affordable. And then your plan makes sense, but the area doesn't seem to carry enough of above minimum wage jobs to make the shared parking make sense to some degree, unless I'm not understanding it right.
Well, I think it's good food for thought for the developers for when they do come back, since we're not going to be addressing shared parking or anything but the rezone and the general plan amendment at this evening's meeting. So do you have anything else, Commissioner?
Well, that's it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Pava.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask of staff to remind myself and my fellow commissioners, were this to change to C2, is there any change in the height, the maximum height allowed on the property? And what specifically would that maximum height allowed be?
Can address that. I'm happy to, Commissioner Pava and commissioners and chairman. The maximum height in the C2 zoning district is 45 feet.
Staff, do you concur with that?
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
And right now, the proposal is the combination of 2- and 3-story buildings. We have 2 2-story buildings and one, and the mixed-use building would be 3-story building. It would be a 3-story building.
Thank you to the applicant and staff for clarifying that for the record.
Thank you. You're done, Mr. Pava, Commissioner Pava. Okay. I just have a question. And if you could be specific, Ms. Jenkins, why the C2 zoning versus mixed use? Everything that we're hearing, everything we're talking about, it refers to mixed use. You heard it all over during the election season. People are saying this is what we need. We need to be livable, walkable. Mixed use is a way to get this done. And HomeWise being the premier affordable housing and one of the bigger developers in this town, why did you shy away from mixed use and decide to go with a C2 zoning?
Thank you, Chairman. That is an excellent question. Candidly, I'm not a fan of mixed use of the MU zoning in the code. It is way too prescriptive. It is limited. It does not allow for as much creativity and diversity and being able to be nimble in your development program and to respond to market conditions and market demand. I'm not a huge fan. But the beauty of the code is that C2 is great mixed use zoning. It checks all the boxes. It gives you maximum flexibility. So what if we build this and the ground floor of one of the residential buildings, all of a sudden we're getting great, huge commercial demand and we're about to build that building. It's like, you know what, let's convert the ground floor of building number 2 to commercial 2 because we're getting a huge demand for that. And then we're gonna put, condos upstairs. But with the MU zoning, it's just too prescriptive. And when you're trying to respond meaningfully to market conditions in a mixed use environment, you need to be nimble in order to do that. And the mixed use zoning doesn't really provide for that.
In some of the answers to your criterion to be met for this general plan, you're quoting mixed use and saying mixed use.
Yeah,
And
mixed
so,
use it's a term of art used to describe our program. It's not intended to be referring to the city's MU zoning category. It's what we're proposing. We're proposing a mix of residential and commercial uses in one project.
okay. That was my question, Mr. Director Klug. We have a lot of areas that defaulted to mixed use. We have other places in the city, and still on my time in this commission, I haven't seen a successful mixed use project that comes to mind. Just food for thought as we're going forward and working on things with the city. Commissioner Satenia.
Duly noted, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I move the approval of the general plan amendment request for case 2021-4375. And I also move the approval of the rezoning request for case 2021-4376. In addition to approving findings of fact and conclusions of law for case 2021-4375 and the approval of findings of facts, conclusions of law for case 2021-4376.
Okay. Second.
Commissioner Hogan will second that.
Thank
Point
you.
of
We
order,
have-
Mr. Chair, can I clarify that is a recommendation of approval for both of those cases?
Yes, ma'am. You can.
And point of clarification, just to be extra certain, we are not saying we support or not support the parking or traffic.
That is correct. All we're doing is making a motion on the rezoning and the general plan amendment. Commissioner Centenia, or Commissioner Pava, either one, the specifics on the sizes and that in the findings of fact, is that something you're comfortable with, or is it something we should put off until it's written more generic?
Speaking for what I raised for the record, I'm satisfied. I think the staff responded and it's in the record. Certainly,
Okay.
the development plan can take a different course. That's same as with the zoning, but that's how this works.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. If we can have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Pava,
Yes.
Commissioner Satenia.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. I lost my agenda. I think we got everything. We're moving on to staff communications, right?
Great. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Any staff communications?
No, Mr. Chair, I have none. I don't know if the director does.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Communications from the commission. See none. Wish you all very happy holidays. Everybody stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy your holidays, and we will see you next year. We're adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Happy holidays,
Thank you,
everybody.
Chair.
Happy
holidays.
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 Take care, everybody.